I have seen 3 pictures of the man. The first, a childhood photograph you might call it, shows him about the age of 10, a small boy surrounded by a great many women, his sisters and cousins, no doubt. He stands in brightly checked trousers by the edge of a garden pond. His head is tilted at an angle 30 degrees to the left, and his teeth are bared in an ugly smirk. Ugly? You may well question the word. For insensitive people, that is to say, those indifferent to matters of beauty and ugliness, would mechanically comment with a bland, vacuous expression. What an adorable little boy. It is quite true that what commonly passes for adorable is sufficiently present in this child's face to give a modicum of meaning to the compliment. But I think that anyone who had ever been subjected to the least exposure to what makes for beauty would most likely toss the photograph to one side with the gesture employed while brushing away a caterpillar, and mutter in profound revulsion, "What a dreadful child." Thus begins Osamu Dazai's 1958 classic, No Longer Human. This is the first in a 9-part series here on the channel, where we will be journeying through this book. Then we will have an opening paragraph video, and then we will have a review for the text itself. This video will be comprised of 3 parts: literary criticism, writer's circle, and then intertextuality. So if you like this sort of thing, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, so consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more. And if you want to help me out with what I'm doing, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. Now, let's get into it. So, what happened? We get 3 pictures of the man. But no, this isn't a Hemingway story. The first picture is not a man, however, but a boy, maybe 10. He is surrounded by women and smiling in a fashion described by our narrator as an ugly smirk. Seems a bit harsh, but our narrator states their reasons. Neither is the second picture necessarily of a man in the way that we might colloquially understand. The narrator describes an adolescent or a young man, a student, maybe high school, maybe college. This time the subject is alone and extremely handsome. A quandary which sounds familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on why. His good looks, however, baffle our narrator, because despite the subject being a good-looking man, he seems more good-looking than man, stating the picture produces, in short, a sensation of complete artificiality. Pretense, insecurity, insincerity, fatuousness, none of these words quite covers it. The third picture shows the subject as the most monstrous of all. Hardly a ringing endorsement, but it was taken in a corner of an extraordinarily dirty room. And where good looks had been, there remains only a ghastly facade. In fact, not only is the room dirty, but also crumbling in 3 places. Our narrator leaves us with the phrase, "I have never seen such an inscrutable face on a man." I know what you're saying. It's just a few pages, Adrian. There's no lit crit to talk about here. And that's where you would be mistaken. There is some stuff to talk about here. Maybe no conclusions yet to be drawn, but certainly things that we can take something from. Now, I want to talk about what we are seeing with these pictures. In the first picture, our subject is social. Our subject is there with other people. He is surrounded by women. This is a social thing. So in the second picture, it is a little bit jarring. There has been some evolution in this individual to where he is antisocial, alone, but he has the ability to be social, good looking. He is a good looking fella. He could have women around him. And in the third picture, he is antisocial, alone, but so foreboding that even the world around him, which means sociability and civilization, as represented by the house in which he is sitting, is crumbling around him. There is the phrase here, I will pull it up just so I can quote it precisely. Um, You can plainly see in the picture how the wall is crumbling in 3 places. That is a bad sign. Those little things, those little details, aren't just thrown in by the author because he or she thinks of them. They are meant to represent something. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is that the paradox we're setting up here is being set up in a way that we would not get from a first person narrator. So we are getting this from a distance. Also, who's taking those pictures when our subject is alone? This requires us to imagine things. We are implicating other people. We are implicating the narrator here. We're implicating the subject here, and we are implicating a third party who is taking these pictures. There is more going on than we are being shown. So we have to come into this story with the understanding that at some point some of these things should be explained to us. That is in the prologue here just a matter of mystery. But we have to believe that it will not always be so. Now, the next thing that is worth setting up here is something we have to watch going forward. The number 3. We get 2 examples of the number 3. We were handed 3 pictures by our narrator, and our narrator told us in the little snippet that I read, the wall behind our subject is crumbling in 3 places. Now, in the West, 3 means something, and we'll get to that in a moment. But what does 3 mean in Eastern culture? So we get this from thejapanmedia.com, which obviously is an infallible source. I have no idea if that is a trusted or relied upon thing. I know a little bit about the number 3 because I have a friend from China, so I looked it up to see if I could find any sources, and this is what we got. 3 is also often preferred. In Japan, there are so many words that use the number 3, such as 3 major fireworks, big 3, and the 3 essential items. There are 2 reasons why the number 3 is favored. Due to kanji, it is written as that right there in Chinese numerals. The number can also be read as Mitsu. The same reading of the word Mitsu means a good harvest. So the number 3 became important in old Japan, where farming was the basis of life and has been carried over to the modern day. It is also important due to Chinese culture. Kanji came from China, and there are many cultures in Japan that are originated from China. The yin yang philosophy is a Chinese philosophy that classifies into 2 categories: yang, positive, and yin, negative. In this yin yang philosophy, even numbers are considered to be yin numbers, bad luck numbers, and odd numbers are considered to be yang numbers, good luck numbers. In this yin yang philosophy, 1 is a sacred number that represents the beginning of things. And the next odd number, 3, is favored because it is auspicious. This philosophy has influenced Japan, and the number 3 is preferred. This is interesting because we are leading in to a story that seems to be setting us up into negative territories, but in the West. So here's an overarching thing that we need to be of which we need to be cognizant. Everything that is in the text is in the text. And everything that is not in the text, if you can read it into the text, well, it's in the text. My philosophy on literature and literature criticism, I don't care what the author planted in the text. I don't care what is supposed to be there. What is important to me is what we can read into the text and play with, right? Because this is literature. It is meant to be an exploration. This is a practice. So this is different than the school of thought that we can read things into history, because the literature that is presented to us is a tool. It is a tool for these things right here, our noggins. So anything that we can read into the text, we can talk about. So I have often said that you can be a jerk and look at Shakespeare and say, that's literature, baby. But if you can pick up the Sunday comics and read the human experience into them, maybe that's a scholarly pursuit. So maybe the Western idea of the Holy Trinity is not in this book, but it is interesting to think about it in this context. We have this individual who is obviously slowly degrading over his life, downhill trajectory. And we have twice invoked the number three, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And here we have Jesus with, see the hand symbol there? Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. There's also some weird stuff you can do with your hands that is apparently Gnostic. That was how they would communicate other ideas, and it's put into art from the Middle Ages and whatnot, slightly before the Middle Ages, maybe. But it is interesting to read the idea of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost into this, because if we're casting the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost into this reading, well, the Son would be the child, right? The Father would be maybe the student, that middle picture. But the Holy Ghost would be that angry fella that is in the third picture with the walls crumbling around him. Now, how much of this can we bring into the story? How much of the good luck is planted in the rest of the story? Will the number three play a big role going forward? It's hard to say. But these things are always interesting to talk about. Yeah. As always, there are some writer's notes to take from this. On page 6, now, but obviously, this is a translation translated by Donald Keene, so we are not getting the original language employed. So we have to take that into account. But there are always things we can take from this as a writer, or even as a reader, just in appreciation of the craft. On 16, we get this quote: I am unable to recall a single thing about it. This face could never be made the subject of a painting, not even of a cartoon. I open my eyes. There is not even the pleasure of recollecting. Of course, that's the kind of face it was. To state the matter in the most extreme terms, when I open my eyes and look at the photograph a second time, I cannot remember it. Besides, it rubs against me the wrong way and makes me feel so uncomfortable that in the end I want to avert my eyes. Now, this is not showing us, it's telling us. I am unable to recall a single thing. You can give us this as a moment. I close my eyes and cannot conjure the picture. Blackness is before me, darkness, but maybe that is preferable to the actual image. Something like that. Um, Obviously, that's borderline on telling as well, but we get the images instead of just, I open my eyes. There is not even the pleasure of recollecting. Of course, that's the kind of face it was. If you tell us not that that's the kind of face it was, You zoom in on the face of our subject. I cannot tell where his cheekbone stops and his chin begins. It is just a vastness of flesh that is incomparable to any face I have known. These sorts of things, as opposed to the sort of surface levels of it rubs against me the wrong way. I want to avert my eyes. Don't tell us that you want to avert your eyes. Close your eyes. I close my eyes again to escape the piercing gaze from the photo. Something like that. Because what happens when you tell us things like, I want to avert my eyes, seemingly as if the narrator themselves is powerless to do so, it becomes melodramatic. Oftentimes, melodrama is the result of emotions as opposed to actions. So, not acting on an emotion, simply stating an emotion, or bold face exhibiting the emotion, screaming, is melodramatic, versus wincing and moving away. That is not melodramatic. Both are fearful actions, but the melodrama of, oh, versus flinching and wincing away. When actions are taken, it can be a whole lot more cinematic for the reader to follow. Now, one thing this gets into, this paragraph we just read, that is directly happening a little bit later. We get the narrator telling us, I think that. That's kind of filtering. Filtering is more or less if, say, your character is drunkenly walking down the street and he hears a loud bang, but he doesn't move. That's filtering. Just give your reader the loud bang. Your character didn't hear a loud bang. The loud bang happened. I think that that's filtering, because otherwise we would get this sentence. Besides, it rubs against me the wrong way and makes me feel so uncomfortable that in the end I want to avert my eyes. A death mask would hold more of an expression, leave more of a memory. Instead, we get the phrase, I think that even a death mask would hold more of an expression, leave more of a memory. We have no need for the I think, and that paragraph ends with the phrase, I have never seen such an inscrutable face on a man. That again is filtering. I have never seen. We don't need that. If you just give us, such an inscrutable face has never existed on a man before, and I hope never does again, will not ever exist again. That is the sort of writing that your reader has no choice but to fall into. The last thing that I want to note is the scant writing style. There's not a whole lot of detail here. This is sort of the style is maybe somewhere between Ernest Hemingway and Chuck Palahniuk. So if we take that going into the story, we understand as a reader that there's going to be more of us that has to be injected into this story. And that's fine, right? So Hemingway expects you as the reader to put more in to the text than he's written into the text. There's more to the text than is in the words. This is the iceberg theory. You can look into that. Maybe I'll make a video on it sometime. But the iceberg theory says that there is more to the text than is explicitly stated in the text. But a lot of that is also emotional. And the sort of the great thing about that, the great thing about emotions being left out of the text, there's some emotions in here, but the great thing about emotions being left out of the text is every time you read this text, you will be a little bit of a different person. This is one of the hallmarks of what makes literature with the capital L, literature with the capital L. Every time you read this text, every time you come to this book, you will be a different person. Therefore, your reading will be different if not every little thing is given to you. Think of, we don't have a whole lot of this in today's world because we get remakes of movies, but they're kind of, weird about it. But every time a different actor is cast in a Shakespearean play, for example, everyone wants to see how did Branagh do Hamlet versus how did, oh, I don't even know who else played Hamlet, but how did a different actor play Hamlet? The different things the actor brings to the work are going to be based on that actor. Because there are so many things not directly put in to a Shakespearean text. We just get the words and a little bit of stage direction. Because of that, every time we read Shakespeare, we're a different person. We're having a different experience with those characters. The play itself is different to us. That is one of the things, that is the power of writing in scant form. Yeah. The thing I want to look at with intertextuality here is a neat trick pulled off by our author here with this very first part of the novel. And the reason I chose this short story is that it does something very, very similar to that. So, Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been by Joyce Carol Oates is one of my absolute favorite short stories, not because it's enjoyable, but because it's absolutely devastating. I believe there is at least one video on the channel about this short story. If not, there should be. Let me know if there isn't. I'll get to it. But um, what this short story is about is there is a teen girl who is maybe too young to really be left alone at home, but she starts this story getting in an argument with her family. They're going to the mall or something, and she wants to stay home. She doesn't want to go with them. During the course of this, she remembers having been out at the mall with her friends previously. Now, friends is a funny word to talk about here because once her family leaves, she is confronted with a man named Arnold Friend. And Arnold Friend is shown to us several times during the course of this short story, the same way that our main character is shown to us several times during the epilogue of No Longer Human. But each time we see Arnold Friend, he is a little bit different. And that is what is going on here in the epilogue with our character here. And I want to show you how it's done by Joyce Carol Oates in Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? The very first time we get a real meaty description of him, it's this. He laughed as if she had said something funny. He slapped his thighs. He was standing in a strange way, leaning back against the car as if he were balancing himself. He wasn't tall, only an inch or so taller than she would be if she came down to him. Connie liked the way he dressed, which was the way all of them dressed. Tight, faded jeans stuffed into black, scuffed boots, a belt that pulled his waist in and showed how lean he was, and a white pullover shirt that was a little soiled and showed the hard muscles of his arms and shoulders. He looked as if he probably did hard work, lifting and carrying things. Even his neck looked muscular, and his face was a familiar face somehow. The jaw and chin and cheeks slightly darkened because he hadn't shaved for a day or two, and the long nose and hawk like sniffing as if she were a treat he was going to gobble up, and it was all a joke. So we get a little bit of mixed signals the first time that we get him. We get these predatory descriptions, hawk like, gobble up. But we also, Connie liked the way he was dressed. Small muscles of his arms and shoulders. He looked as if he probably did hard work, lifting and carrying things. Even his neck looked muscular. These are positives, right? He even dresses the way they all dress. Connie liked the way he dressed. So we get these positive sort of descriptions here. But later, we get this. He looked at her. He took off the sunglasses, and she saw how pale the skin around his eyes was, like holes that were not in shadow but instead in light. His eyes were like chips of broken glass that catch the light in an amiable way. He smiled. It was as if the idea of going for a ride somewhere, to some place, was a new idea to him. Then later, she stared at Arnold Friend. He stood there so stiffly relaxed, pretending to be relaxed, with one hand idly on the door handle as if he were keeping himself up that way, and had no intention of ever moving again. She recognized most things about him, the tight jeans that showed his thighs and buttocks, and the greasy leather boots, and the tight shirt, and even that slippery, friendly smile of his, that sleepy, dreamy smile that all the boys used to get across ideas they didn't want to put into words. So each time that we get another look at him, he's a little bit worse, and he's a little less human, and he's a little scarier. Um, and then we get just this weird sort of thing about him. One of his boots was at a strange angle, as if his foot wasn't in it. It pointed out to the left, bent at the angle. So each time we are shown Arnold Friend, he becomes less and less human, no longer human. Um, he becomes something else entirely. And when you read the story, he gets this almost alien ambiance about him. This alien that's coming to abduct the young girl, Connie. But so we get the same thing here by being shown, even though the three different pictures from three different ages, we get the same thing because they are less and less human. And what that does for us as a reader, and this is something interesting, should be interesting both to readers as well as to writers, what we get here when this happens is we get the first time someone is described to us, we have them in our head, right? So we have them as a part of us. But the first time we're shown Arnold Friend here, he's kind of attractive. Maybe if the right things played out, we could get to know him better. But then his eyes are no longer eyes, but holes covered by shards of glass. The second time we see our character here in No Longer Human, our character is very handsome, but somehow disconnected. The third time we see Arnold Friend, his boots don't even fit. It's like he doesn't have feet inside them. His very mode of locomotion is questionable at that point. How does he move around? Is he slithering? What is going on there? He is not human. He is here in predatory fashion. The third time we see our character here, he is in a room that is crumbling, a room that is falling apart. These are, and so what we have done is we have learned a thing. We have Arnold Friend in our head. We have this character from No Longer Human in our head. We're familiar with that person. We have cast them in our imagination. And then slowly, they are changed before our eyes. Slowly, we are learning that we were mistaken. We were wrong. So the thing that we have inside us that had haunted our imagination is slowly being twisted and turned. It's a really insidious sort of idea here. It's something that also is pulled off fairly well in the House on Haunted Hill, The Haunting of Hill House. Pardon me. Um, do I have it? Uh, the Shirley Jackson novel, The Haunting of Hill House. We are shown this big manor, and constantly things are changed about it that we thought we knew. We were told these things, and then suddenly they are no more. We were mistaken. We were wrong. And it is something transforming before our very eyes, before our inner eye, right? Before our mind's eye, Horatio. So we are witnessing and feeling and experiencing something transform, which was given to us and is no longer that way. Uh, it's a very haunting and chilling thing if a writer can pull it off. I happen to think that it was pulled off. Certainly was pulled off by Joyce Carol Oates. I think it's pulled off in this novel too, because we are given the proper distance from everything. We are seeing these pictures that have taken place over time, and now we are wrong. So here, we're starting the very novel off that way. This was only a few pages, this epilogue, but already we have to deal with the fact that we have been wrong completely about the thing that we are seeing. The remaining photograph is the most monstrous of all. It is quite impossible in this one even to guess the age, though the hair seems to be streaked somewhat with gray. It was taken in a corner of an extraordinarily dirty room. You can plainly see in the picture how the wall is crumbling in 3 places. His small hands are held in front of him. This time he is not smiling. There is no expression whatsoever. The picture has a genuinely chilling, foreboding quality, as if it caught him in the act of dying as he sat before the camera, his hands held over a heater.